I want to try to do something a little bit different, a little unorthodox this morning. When we get started with a new release, we often just want to talk about what's new, what's new. At 10, there's these great new functions. But if you think about it, do we really care? As users, we don't really care what's new. What we care about is how will the technology help us do our job better, faster, more efficiently, or help us do things that we've never been able to do before. So that's the question I want to look at this morning. And I want to take you through a real workflow, a real problem to see how we can address that. So we're going to look at a story. The story goes something like this. Yosemite National Park is one of the most beautiful parks in the U.S., and we're going to look at a public policy debate. The question is, do we want to try to preserve as much of the park as undisturbed wilderness, or do we want to put in cell towers so that my cell phone can work in the park? So if you think about that question, which way do we go? I want to do a quick poll. Raise your hand if you think we should keep it as wilderness. So it looks like the majority say wilderness. Okay. Let's add a little drama to the story. You're out hiking in the park with your 60-year-old relative. They start having chest pains. They get disoriented. They go off the trail and they get lost. What do you want to do? You want to pull your cell phone out and make a phone call to get help, but you can't because there's no cell coverage in the area. So we're starting to create this life and death problem, and it's not a simple choice of wilderness or cell phones. So we're going to try to look at this a little bit more carefully, and those of you that are the purists are going to say, well, if you go in the park and you want that wilderness experience, you got to learn how to survive without your cell phone. But that's not quite true because everybody else is out there hoping their cell phone works. You're going to start paying for search and rescues. Your tax dollars are going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go find all of the other people that get lost. Or your backcountry experience is going to be disturbed because you're going to hear the search and rescue helicopter flying overhead, and it's not going to be quite as nice as what you had originally hoped. So these are some of the issues that we're going to look at, and what I want to do is take you through the workflow of how we would do that with these, hopefully, more efficient tools. Now, the unorthodox part is I just don't want to tell you how it's going to be better. I want you to experience it for yourself. So I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to talk to myself. I'm going to tell you what I was thinking, what I was experiencing as I went through this for the first time, the second time, and I started to learn more and more about what's possible. So we'll give it a try. Yosemite National Park, and I wanted to go through and look at the search and rescue, or SAR. So there were about 220 search and rescue events, operations last year spread throughout the park. But there's a lot of other things that are going to be impacted by our telecommunication network. So we need to start studying those as well. For example, we have wildfires, natural wildfires, we have prescribed burns. We have more than 4 million visitors that enter the park from the 5 main gates. We've got more than 13,000 law enforcement incidents spread throughout the park. And we have those 220 search and rescue operations. The map's starting to look a little bit messy. There's a lot of information here. So what are the patterns that I can start to see in this data? And how can I really understand these patterns? Before I ask the questions, I need to explore the data a little bit more. A lot of this data has a time component. Everything in the park is really controlled by seasons, by months, by when people come to the park. So let's explore, what if I could use the new system clock for ArcGIS that allows you to set a time for the system, and in this case I set it to March. So any of the temporal layers that know that they have a timestamp or a date field, now it's only going to display that information for the month of March, and we can see most of the activity is in the southwest side of the park and in Yosemite Valley. You want to see what it looks like in April or May? May is interesting. Now you start to see the patterns emerge from the data. The road to Tioga Pass in the east is opened up. More people are starting to come in. It's also the beginning of the fire season. As you continue through, by the time we get to July, we're now kind of in the peak visitor season, and you'll see the activity is spread out all across the backcountry. We've got lots of search and rescue operations happening. It almost looks like they're happening daily. You've got a lot of activity in the Yosemite Valley, as well as looks like there's an interesting pattern up near Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. So now that I've started to explore the data a little bit, I can ask the question and start to get a little more analytical with this. And the first question I wanted to ask was, where do the visitors go? Well, that's actually a data set I have on my laptop. So I can add that. I can use the add data dialog like we've always done, but I'm starting to learn how to use this new catalog window. A catalog window that's embedded in the application. You don't have to start a secondary application, and now I can more easily browse to the data set I need and add it. That window just automatically hides away once we're done. So with this, go back to the story. Most visitors go to Yosemite Valley. That's the bright red spot. They also go up near Hetch Hetchy, a few go to Tuolumne, and a few down south to Wawona. How does that overlay with the search and rescue data? You can see there's some correlation. Where people go is also where they get in trouble, but they also get in trouble when they're off in the backcountry. So let's analyze these search and rescue points a little bit more and try to quantify those. Now, I don't really need to do that because my colleague did that 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, she forgot to tell me where she put the data. It's somewhere out on the network, and I want to be able to find that. So I can explore how to use the new search interface. I knew I wanted search and rescue data. I do the query, just like a Google search or a Bing search. You search for that information, and now I get back 50 results. So that's way too much. I don't even want to read that list. But if I think about what was really going through my head, I knew I wanted the SAR data. I was actually looking for the hotspots, and I was looking for the layer file, because that's what had all the symbology. So I can very easily just type out what was going through my head to quickly discover that data. It's far more efficient, in my mind, than browsing through directory trees trying to locate that information. So if we look at these results, look at the density. We have large clusters of search and rescue operations in the main valley, and we also have this cluster up northeast of Hetch Hetchy. Well, going back to our problem, we wanted to look at how does this relate to cell phone coverage. The cell phone coverage is shown in purple and pink, and you can see how it starts to intersect with the main valley where most people go and off to the east, but we actually have very poor cell phone coverage up in the northwest part of the park. So it looks like there may be some things we could do if we choose in this area. So let's take a closer look at the area around Hetch Hetchy. And what happens when anybody uses a pan and zoom tool? You zoom in and you never quite get it right the first time. So we're always doing this. We're always moving the map around, trying to get to just the right location. So I'm actually trying to train myself how to use some keyboard shortcuts so I can immediately roam around. So it's a very different experience. The base map is continually updating so I can navigate to the areas I want, and I don't spend as much time waiting for that map to redraw every single time.